Hey everyone, so I wanted to make a quick inferencing video that helps us to use it whenever we're looking at longer passages. So first off, I need to know what it means to make an inference. So that means I can make an educated guess based on the clues in the text. So when I make an inference, I have to go back in the text and find evidence that shows me why a certain answer is true. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the first example. I've already done this one for us, so I'm going to read the passage first, and then we'll go through and see how I answered the questions, okay? All right, so it says, Mrs. Jack's last day. Mrs. Jack had a blast working with the first graders in Mr. Brown's class. She came to his class as a student teacher every day for 2 months. Mrs. Jack smiled a lot, told silly jokes, and made learning lots of fun. Everyone was sad on her last day of student teaching. Towards the end of the day, the class had a surprise party for her. She couldn't believe it when she saw treats and a gift bag sitting by her chair. Each child had made a page for a special book about her. With smiles of gratitude, Mrs. Jack cried when she read the pages in the book. At the very end of the day, it was a big, giant hug fest. Mrs. Jack promised to come back for a visit sometime soon. All right, so for question number 1, it says, underline or highlight all the words and phrases above that show that Mrs. Jack likes being a student teacher. So that's what I've done first. I went through and I reread the passage asking myself, how do I know Mrs. Jack likes to be a student teacher? So here's some of the evidence that I underlined and found. Mrs. Jack had a blast working with the first graders in Mr. Brown's class. Okay, so that tells me if she had a blast doing it, she probably enjoyed it. The next one says Mrs. Jack smiled a lot. She told silly jokes. She made learning lots of fun. That tells me she probably enjoyed it. And then the last thing I underlined was that Mrs. Jack promised to come back for a visit sometime soon. So all of those sentences are evidence in my text that tells me she must have liked being a student teacher. All right, question number 2. Do the kids like learning from Mrs. Jack? Well, that's a definite yes. But we need to go back and take a look and see what proves it. So when I reread the passage, asking myself, how do I know the kids like learning from Mrs. Jack? I found this sentence. Everyone was sad on her last day of student teaching. So if they were sad to see her go, that must mean that they really enjoy learning from her. All right, number 3. Did Mrs. Jack love her special book? Yes. So when I went back to see why, I found this sentence. With smiles of gratitude, that means thankfulness, Mrs. Jack cried when she read the pages in her book. Now, since it tells me that she had smiles of gratitude or thankfulness, that tells me these tears were happy tears. Okay? So that tells me she probably loved her special book. Question number 4. Will the kids miss Miss Jack? Yes. Now, I used the same sentence that I used in question number 2 as evidence, and that's perfectly fine. Everyone was sad on her last day of student teaching. That tells me that they will definitely miss her. Question number 5. Did Mrs. Jack get a hug from more than one student? Yes. So here's how I know. I went back up, and at the very end of the passage, I see at the very end of the day, it was a big, giant hug fest. So that's the sentence that I copied as my evidence. And the 2 key words would be big, giant, and then of course, it tells me there was a hug fest, which means more than one student came up to give her a hug. Okay? All right, question number 6. I'm going to read it, and then we're going to have to make an inference or an educated guess based on my story. Why do you think Mrs. Jack feels sad about it being her last day? And one thing that I chose to answer was that because she loved the students in Mr. Brown's first grade class. Now, the story itself did not say the word loved, but based on all of the inferences I can make from the text, I'm going to conclude that she definitely loved her students. Okay? All right, so that would be my inference that I made for question number 6. I hope that helps, and I'm looking forward to seeing your all's work in the next lesson. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.